Do not sleep on Milgram. Do not sleep on Milgram. Do not sleep on Milgram. Milgram is a song project currently being created with Deco 27 in charge of the music, Otorio, the animator of many of Deco's recent songs, in charge of the movies, and Takuya Yamanaka from the Oral Cigarettes in charge of authoring the actual story. Not only is this already a smorgasbord of talent, and not only is there a sweeping suite of vocal talent involved as well, this is without a doubt the most intriguing mix of raw composition and audiovisual complexity that I've seen from any of these separate involved parties in a really long time. I've been longing, thirsting for a series of musical mysteries for years, and though I can't say where this train is going, I'm riding first class right now. The best part? This project is still in its infancy, so there's plenty of time for you to get in and see where the train takes us. For now, I'll go through what we have and know so far. I sincerely hope some of you will take this journey with me. Milgram is the story of 10 inmates, a young prison guard, and a talking rabbit. The protagonist is ostensibly the amnesiac guard S, who under the direction of Jackalope must review the crimes of the 10 inmates, all of whom have been charged with murder, and determine if they are innocent or guilty. How is this done? Through visualizations of their minds brought to life through music. Each inmate receives a music video made about them and their crime, after which public voting begins through social media to determine whether or not they are guilty or innocent. That would be intriguing enough already, and we'll be looking at the inmates' videos for sure, but first there's plenty of details and mysteries worth discussing about the premise and indeed about S and Jackalope to begin with. So before we get into Weakness, the first song for Inmate Haruka, let's take a closer look at all parties involved with the first song of the project, Undercover. Undercover can be similarly compared to Children Record in that it focuses not too much on anyone in particular, but rather gives a sweeping overview of many of the characters and their outlooks. But unlike Children Record, there's a clear unbalance of power, and we're looking at the music through a lens. While there's a lot to say about the actual inmates, and I'm sure much more will become apparent as their prisoner songs are released, the interesting thing about Undercover is what it says about S and Jackalope. The video starts with S holding a box numbered 000, before being surrounded with 10 more boxes that represent the other inmates. As the vocals kick in, we see that we're not actually hearing anything from S's mind, as the lyrics are S echoing the sentiments of each of the inmates that are focused on. It's only when the chorus hits that we actually hear S speak for themselves, in which they question the listeners and indeed probably their own ability to hear the stories of these inmates rationally and make the right choice, if it's even possible to make the right choice under these specific circumstances. For now, I'll skip over most of the details about the actual prisoners. Haruka and Yuna will be broken down a lot more when we get to their actual videos, and I'll be sure to offer some speculation for the others at the end, but for now let's focus on the one running the show. When we pull into the final chorus, we see each of the inmates in silhouette as they, in some way, replicate the details of their murder against a dressed-down S. As the song begins to fade, we see the outline of S dressed normally before turning around in surprise. This brief scene is quickly locked away in the box labeled 000. In the end, S is nowhere to be seen as Jackalope oversees the closing of the box. There is clearly something not being said about S. S is the one in charge, and yet he has no memories, is a child himself, and seemingly much more embroiled in the goings-on than initially stated. The final few seconds of Undercover, and the fact that they have a box and number at all, would seem to suggest that they too are a criminal, or perhaps some sort of victim. The imagery in the final chorus is also striking, and I feel that the fact that everyone is shown brutalizing S is not a coincidence. Digging a little deeper reveals some strange things as well. You may have thought it kinda strange that I'm using gender-neutral pronouns to refer to S. This is actually because the website details that no one knows S's gender. They speak using boku, which is generally more masculine, but it's hardly uncommon a thing for young girls to do, and their voice is vaguely childish without anything particularly striking about it. Furthermore, adding to the suspicion, the rabbit Jackalope can only actually be heard and understood by S. If I had to posit a theory, S is deeply involved in the grander plot. It's quite possible that they have a connection to all of the inmates in some currently unidentifiable way. Jackalope is the clear antagonist now if I had to point to one, and S is being strung along as much as the other inmates. And that's all putting aside the clear sign that this song is called Undercover, which would go on to suggest that S's true goals and identities are being hidden, hence being undercover. Either way, it's clear that S's amnesia is a deliberate smokescreen, and that they have a story as rich as anyone else's. And speaking of everyone else, there are 2 prisoner songs out at present, Weakness and Umbilical. Let's take a look at each. Weakness is the first prisoner song and focuses on the docile Sakurai Haruka. If one were to characterize him in this song, the easiest words would be childishness and longing. The whole PV is filled with crayon illustrations, and, if you flip over to the Japanese captions, you can see that they're written out almost entirely in hiragana, with only the simple kanji here or there, again alluding to the childishness. What this, as well as the fact that Haruka spends most of the video reflecting on a younger version of himself, implies is that he is both suffering from a sort of emotional arrested development and that his trauma stems from his youth. The main focus of the song is the relationship Haruka had with his mother. We see that Haruka both longed for his mother's attention while also feeling like he didn't deserve it. Throughout the video, we see Haruka through multiple relationships that all end in tragedy or failure. He's seen with a girl who ultimately disappears. He bludgeoned his dog to death. And at the end of the song, his mother leaves him as well. So what's actually happening here? Well, the details are vague to be sure, but I can say with fair reasoning that Haruka's mother was abusing him. His simultaneous problem with self-worth in combination with his eternal and unfulfilled longing for attention and validation is characteristic of children suffering from neglect. In the first verse, we see a young Haruka chase after his mother, who only just slightly looks back at him, only for older Haruka to stop him. Behind him, a frightening image of someone he clearly didn't like too much in a pool of blue blood, which is later used around the dog in the second chorus and the mysterious body in the last chorus. Suffice to say, I think that Haruka ultimately killed his mother. As for the girl in the first chorus, it's harder to say, but it seems that, at the very least, that was a normal relationship that Haruka had that ended in tragedy. He may have killed her, as we do see a blue stain and her face is similarly censored like his mother's, but in any event, it was Haruka's longing and strife that made that relationship end. With the dog, it seems as though something similar occurred. Haruka's inability to interface with the outside world, stemming from his own neglect and problems with self-worth, led to him killing the dog. If I had to guess, I'd say it's most likely that the dog drew away the attention of his mother, and thus he saw it as an obstacle. But that's only speculation. It may also be that Haruka was so socially adjusted that he killed it one day in aggravation. Either way, the stem of this goes back to his family. In the end, Haruka blames not his mother, nor those around him, but himself. Hence why he lashes out against the image of his younger self, which, if you ask me, means he should get some serious help, not that he should be killed. Umbilical, the second song belonging to inmate Kashiki Yuna, is a lot more simple and easy to understand. Yuna is a high school sex worker. Her murder is that she's had at least one abortion. How do we know that this is true? Well, there's some pretty clear imagery at work here. A recurring symbol is a beige-colored balloon, which quite literally represents her uterus. At the start of the song, it's blank and the same color as her skin. As the song goes on, though, it fills with orbs and a heart as the fetus matures before popping at the end of the song. Yuna is climbing a staircase that resembles the double helix of DNA, which shatters apart when the abortion happens. Furthermore, if you go back to Undercover, S's line about Yuna in the first verse talks about the feeling of emptiness inside oneself. And in the last chorus, S is not being killed directly, but rather there's a large amount of blood coming out from Yuno's legs with S lying on the ground, lifeless. Complicating Yuna's situation are a few lyrics that imply she became a sex worker both out of a desire for money as well as an innate emptiness, the cause we cannot identify, and the possibility that she wanted to keep the baby but was forced to undergo an abortion. At the end of the song, she no longer has her would-be child and is abandoned by her suitor. The song doesn't end, but instead fades out, implying that she still hasn't come to terms with herself and keeps living in a state of disarray and denial. The light tone of the song would go to imply that she doesn't want to face her own negative emotions or the severity of her situation. Checking the polls, Haruka is strongly being voted innocent while opinions of Yuno are a lot more divisive. I'd credit that to the fact that while Haruka has without a doubt done more dubious things in his life, he understands that he is in the wrong and that he has to be responsible for his actions. Even if that impulse is born out of his already self-deprecating nature, it still means that he's cogent enough to accept himself. Yuno turns a blind eye both to her own suffering and that of those around her, embracing her ideal of living a happy, sugary life. Regardless of how you feel about the severity of her crime, she herself denies reality, and hence why people are quicker to damn her. This is a series with a lot of talent and a bright future ahead of it. In particular, I'm quite looking forward to seeing the songs for Futa, Amane, and Kotoko, based on what little we've seen of their character thus. Either way, this is not only a story that you can actually follow in the present, but one that you can engage in. Don't like Yuno's status? Change it with your ballot. As for me, I'll be watching intensely. I hope some of you will come along for the ride and help make sure that another creative project doesn't die in its grave. Thank you.